Hello there, Ray here, and today I will be showing a 100% reliable peaceful mode switch that works in multiplayer as well as in single player. The way that peaceful mode switch works is that you can flip a lever to turn off the hostile mobs from spawning in the game. Then once you want the hostile mobs to spawn again, you can flip a lever and after a short delay they will start spawning again. The way that this works is by having so many hostile mobs being loaded by the game that the game does not try to spawn in any more hostile mobs. You may have ran across a similar situation on a server when you come out at night and you notice that there is no hostile mobs spawning in the area. Then you notice that someone is AFKing at a mob spawner and that they have let all the mobs built up in the killing chamber, but they have not killed any of them yet. The problem is that as soon as you leave the area, the mobs will despawn or they will be unloaded by the game. In single player, you can create a peaceful mode switch quite easily by having at least 70 hostile mobs inside of your spawn's lazy processing chunks. So here's spawn, that's marked out over here, and the blue chunks are the entity processing chunks while the red chunks are the lazy processing chunks. Now to get the 70 hostile mobs into these chunks, you can either use a mob spawner or you can even use a pigman portal farm. This will allow you to get over 70 hostile mobs in this area. Now all you have to do is use another portal to leave the area so that you do not despawn the mobs by walking away from the area. Now once you're in the nether, you can use the nether to travel to your base. So let's say you want to travel out to your base. Then you can use another portal to go back into the overworld. And now once you go into the overworld, the hostile mob cat will be held up so that no hostile mobs can spawn. This is because the mobs that spawn are loaded by the spawn chunks, but since they are in lazy processing chunks, they are not loaded as an entity, so they cannot despawn. The problem with this is that you cannot freely walk around near your spawn without despawning them. Also, this does not work the same in multiplayer. So I'm going to show you how you can make a reliable peaceful mode switch for single player as well as multiplayer that you can turn on and off with a lever. The way that this works is that I have 70 withers safely stored in the void under the bedrock, and they are being hopper chunk loaded from spawn as a lazy processing chunk. You can do this without withers by using a mob spawner. The way that you could do this is just by finding a mob spawner that is somewhat near spawn, but not in a location where players would normally load it. Then all you have to do is come in and load it with a single line of hopper chunk loaders. This will allow it to be loaded as a lazy processing chunk. Now these chunk loaders just go back to your spawn chunks and they just load outward. If you're unsure where your spawn chunks start, you can just start from the center of your spawn and start loading chunks in that direction. Your mob spawner setup doesn't have to be pretty. All you need to do is spawn in 70 of some type of hostile mob, and then make sure that your chunk loaders are loading all the area that the hostile mobs are taking up. Now if you have 70 mobs, you'll have enough to prevent mobs from spawning with one player loading chunks around him. Now if you have more people online, you can have more mobs in this area. Now here I have 170, so this is probably enough to handle 2 people online. Now if both those people are in the same area, then you only need 70 mobs as well. Once you have reached the amount of mobs that you want to have stored, you can leave through the nether portal, and then you can use the nether to go to a different place, but mostly you want to go back to your spawn, and this nether portal takes me back to my spawn. Now once you get back to spawn, you can see that there is no hostile mobs spawning if you have done it correctly, or no new hostile mobs will spawn in the area. You just want to remember not to go back to that spawner and reload it accidentally, or else the mobs will despawn. But with this on, it's just like you're almost in peaceful mode, where there will not be any more hostile mobs spawning. Now to get it to turn on and off with the lever, you just need to run a redstone line from your spawn chunks out to each of the chunk loaders. Now this will lock each of the hoppers, which will prevent the hoppers from checking the next chunk to see if there is a container to put their item into. You will want to do this as to all the chunk loaders as far out as you think that they may get loaded by the player. The scoreboard is showing if the mobs in the distance are loaded. Now with the lever powered off, the mobs will be loaded by the hopper chunk loaders and no new mobs will spawn in the area, but some old mobs still may be around until they despawn. Now you can turn the hostile mobs back on by flipping the lever and then waiting until the next autosave, which will unload all the pseudo lazy processing chunks. This will take about 45 seconds, but you can speed this up in single player by pausing the game, which will unload the chunks. But with this method you still have the problem where the mobs could be accidentally loaded by the player and then they will despawn. So if you want a reliable peaceful mode switch, then I would recommend this last method, which is where we use the withers to hold the mob cap. I recommend this for more advanced servers. You will want to do the same as a spawner where you load the chunks out to where you have the withers. I would recommend keeping them pretty far away from your spawn chunks, since they do make quite a bit of noise They also darken the sky, as well as they have these health bars above the screen. To hold down the mob cap for one player, you will need at least 70 withers. If you want to hold down the mob cap for more players, you can always add more withers to this. But for 70 withers, you will need 210 wither skulls, so it's best to have a AFK wither skeleton farm. To safely hold 70 withers, we will store them in the void under the bedrock of the world. And to get them there, we will need to have a hole in the bedrock so that we can drop the withers down into the void. When we're storing the withers, we will want the withers to be pretty much in the center of the chunk because they do take up quite a bit of room when you have them all underneath of the bedrock. So we will want to do a bedrock breaking sort of in the corner of one of the chunks, or you can do the bedrock breaking outside of one chunk, and then you can move the withers, which I'll show later on, into a single chunk. The first thing that you will want to do is to light up the area so that no bats will spawn in the area. This will prevent the wither from accidentally targeting one of the bats. Now to break the bedrock, you can use the method I showed with the dragon eggs or the nether portal, or you can use the method with the piston tile ticks that Myron has showed, and I will link the videos in the description to these methods. The easiest will probably be to come in and to remove the majority out with the dragon egg until you get down to this lower layer here, and then come in and use the piston tile tick method to remove the last layer of the bedrock. You will need to remove a bedrock in a 3x5 hole until you get to the last layer, and from here I'll show you how to use the piston method to break a hole down into the void. To break the bedrock in the lower layer, we will first need to get our two headless pistons here. This is the method I showed where you have a TNT, you have two pumpkins, and then you come here and then you will have your two sticky pistons here. Then we just wire back and we have 10 repeaters on full delay going back to this spot here. Now we can just come in here and fill in this to prevent the pistons from getting damaged, as well as cover the pumpkins so that they don't destroy the redstone. Now we can just flip the lever and this will activate the TNT, and then it will extend one of the pistons, which will hopefully blow off one of the heads. So here we see this head, this piston got removed. So now all we have to do is come in and power this piston here with the lever. Now we can depower the entire system and we can set it up for the next one. Now just do it for the next one, and the two pumpkins, and cover it up. Try to cover that lever up, and cover this as well. Now we'll try to remove the next piston's head. It may take a couple of tries, but eventually you should be able to remove both of the pistons' heads. Then we just want to come in and power each of the pistons before depowering this whole system. Now you could power the two pistons just by bud powering them, and you can remove everything else in this area, and now we'll start building up the wiring. Now the wiring's a little bit cramped in this area, but you can manage to get it all in here. So here we have our two headless pistons, and you will want to have them powered until you get this wiring all in, then you can depower them. So I recommend leaving that lever in. And then here we have a piston facing upward, which is a non-sticky piston, and we also have one facing downward, which is a non-sticky piston. Now this one piston that's pulling these two pistons across, we have a repeater with two ticks on it, and then these are all hooked together. And then the next piston is the piston that pulls this one forward, and for this piston we have it being powered by this slab, and then it's coming up and we have two repeaters right behind each other with one tick delay each, and they all come together here. And then this last piston, which is one that's going to pull downward, is the piston that is connected there, but it's hooked with two repeaters and each on one delay with a redstone dust in between them. Now when you will depower this whole entire system, it should be able to pull the pistons over, and this will remove the bedrock from underneath this piston here. So next you can remove all the wiring and get ready to summon the wither, but first we will want to place in a target for the wither. So over here on the side where we kind of have more room, we will place in a chicken for the wither to target so that he will fly up to the target. Now I recommend having it somewhat near the wither, that way he's close enough so he can actually see it, because he will fall down quite far. Here I have it just a couple blocks over here, and make sure that your chicken is way down here. It has to be at least down 2 meters of bedrock, or else the withers will not be able to find the chicken after it being reloaded. Now to get the chicken in a minecart, if you have your chicken over here, if you just have a minecart on a curve rail and you push it, you should be able to pick up an entity quite easily. So now right above your hole that goes down into the void, you want to build a little cage. This will just prevent the wither from flying away when you're summoning it, and make sure you have a block above it as well. Now you can just come in and you can do this in survival and it works just fine. You can just summon in the wither, and the wither will not pay any attention to you, but he will fall down into the void, and once he gets to a point where he will be summoned in and he will be able to move. He will retarget the chicken, so you see, and now he actually went over here and just sitting underneath of the chicken, and he's trying to reach the chicken, but he cannot get to it since all this bedrock is here. Now you can just keep repeating the process until you get enough withers that we will reach the mob cap for however many players you want. Once you have summoned enough withers, you can move the withers away from this hole. If you have like over 70 withers, maybe a possibility that the bunch of withers here will push one wither up through this hole. So to move the withers, we can just move the target that they're looking at, and they're currently looking at this chicken here. So if we just move this chicken over here, then we can have all the withers move with them. So now the withers are over here and they're farther from the hole. But just remember, when you put the chicken back down in a hole, make sure that he's at least 2 meters down below the bedrock layer, and also remember to keep the withers all in a loaded chunk. So here they're still underneath this loaded chunk. Now just come in and encase the chicken to keep it safe, and now your peaceful mode switch should be ready to use. The nether has its own hostile mob cap, so you can do the same thing where you put in enough hostile mobs in the nether to prevent any other hostile mobs in the nether from spawning. You could do this by using the withers to block all the hostile mob spawns, or you could come in and use a blaze spawner to spawn in enough hostile mobs to prevent the hostile mobs in the area from spawning. The difference with the nether is that you do not have the spawn chunks to keep them loaded all the time, and if you try to load the nether through the nether portal from spawn, there will be a point when an autosave comes around and it will unload these chunks. So that if you're in the nether and these chunks get unloaded by the autosave, they will say that there's no hostile mobs because this chunk is unloaded, and the hostile mobs will start spawning around the player. The way that you can make this work in the nether is by chunk loading from the player all the way to the hostile mobs. So let's say the player is at the end of this chunk loader here, and now all these chunk loaders are facing this direction, and they will come here and load these hostile mobs as the player is over in that direction. The other option is to just put the withers in the location where you don't want the hostile mobs to spawn. So let's say you're working on a nether perimeter and you don't want any hostile mobs to spawn. You can just place these withers underneath your nether perimeter, and then as you work in the area, no hostile mobs will be able to spawn. You could do a similar thing as we did in the nether, where you can store up 70 withers. Here I have them stored inside of the exit end portal, and I broke some bedrock here to just hold them in place without getting damaged, but there's 70 withers there. Now using the chunk loaders, we can chunk load these withers here, so that if we leave the area and let's say we're out here at our enderman farm, we can actually have it so that there is no enderman spawning here just because the withers are holding up the mob cap. In 1.8 it is possible to actually safely store your wither just by having it inside of the void with a thin layer of glass above it. This actually is possible because in 1.8 and prior, the wither skulls are just deleted within the void. So the wither skulls actually never be able to hit the glass and destroy it. And this actually works for quite a few other mobs, not only the wither, but it does not work for the snow golem, who is actually still able to shoot inside of the void. But now in 1.9 and above, they now have it so the wither skulls will not be deleted while inside of the void. So the wither skulls will keep traveling until they hit something, or else they will get so far out that they will reach an unloaded chunk where they will just be unloaded. Then if you reload them, they will continue traveling until they reach the next unloaded chunk, but they do not count towards the entity count once they get out there. In 1.9 they also changed it so that wither skulls no longer lose their momentum when they get unloaded. So if we have a wither skull that is moving through the air and you unload it, so let's say this one here, let's unload it, and we will reload it. This would normally cause the wither skull to just freeze in place, but in 1.8 and beyond, the wither skull will actually remember its momentum and continue traveling. This allows it so the wither skulls will actually move out of your world and get deleted eventually, instead of just building up and causing extra lag. The peaceful mode switch will prevent most hostile mobs from spawning in your world, but it will still allow hostile mobs to spawn from spawners, as well as like pigmen coming from the nether portals, and stuff like ender dragons will still be in your world, and your elder guardians will be there, as well as shulkers. Withers have the special characteristics where they count towards mob cap, but they will never despawn. But withers are not the only mobs that have this characteristics. Ender dragon also has this ability, as well as shulkers. So if you want to not use withers, you could also collect 60 or 70 shulkers and transport them anywhere you want, and this would also hold the mob cap, but you'd have to loot quite a few end dungeons to get up to 70 shulkers. The world download to this world is in the description if you want to check it out. I have all the steps that are needed to break the bedrock down into the void, as well as the chunk loaders, as well as the nether and the end dimension. There you have it, a way to make a reliable peaceful mode switch for multiplayer as well as in single player. So if you found this interesting, show me a like. If you'd like to see more technical Minecraft, subscribe. And if you have any questions, be sure to comment. Bye bye!